Before we begin, please read through the data definitions that are available in the starter file. You will see that we have one data definition for a review that a customer could leave for a business online, and one for a list of reviews. We want to design a function that takes a list of reviews and formats them as a string. As always, we'll follow our How to Design Functions recipe and start with the stub, including signature and purpose. Our problem statement tells us that this function takes a list of reviews, and we know that we need to return a formatted string. For the purpose, let's say that this function formats and returns the reviews. Next, we need the body of the stub. We know that it needs to return a value of the return type. In this case, it needs to return a value of the type string. We could return any string, but we'll use the empty string. Next, we need to write our examples. Because this function takes a list, it's always a good idea to have our first example take the empty list as input. It's useful to do that because it helps us think about what our function should return if we give it an empty list. It also may help us catch bugs that we wouldn't find otherwise. Now, let's think about what we want the function to return if we pass it a list of just one review. I can see that R1 is a review with a rating of 1 and the comment, "This coffee shop was terrible." I will copy that comment to use in my formatted string. I'll write 1 star, dash, and then the comment. These examples are helping us think about what our function should return and exactly what format it should use. Now let's do an example with more than one review. We'll use our 1-star review and our 3-star review with the comment, "The food was only okay and the service was slow." Now we have 3 examples. One is the empty list, one contains 1 review, and the last contains 2 reviews. Let's make sure to run our code to check for syntax errors. We can see that all our tests ran. They have no syntax errors, but they fail, and that's what we expect because we haven't finished implementing the function body. The next step of the How to Design Functions recipe is the template. We need to copy the template from the appropriate data definition. I will look at the input type to determine which data definition I need to get the template from. Since this function takes a list of reviews as input, I know that I need to use the template from list of reviews in my function design. I'll scroll up to that data definition and copy the body of the template. Before I paste in the body of the template, I'll comment out the body of the stub. The body of the stub has served its purpose because it allowed us to run the examples. As I paste in the body of the template, I can see the call to Fun for Review in my template, and I'm reminded that I may need to design a helper function that takes a review. We'll be able to determine whether we need a helper or not once we get further through our implementation. Let's move on to implementing the function body. I first need to think about the accumulator. Do I even need an accumulator to solve this problem? I know that I need to return these reviews, formatted as a string, and to be able to do that, I will need to store a formatted string for each review as we iterate through the list. So I do need an accumulator to store that. The type of the accumulator is going to be a string, and we'll set the initial value to be the empty string. Before we've started iterating through the list of reviews, we do not yet have any formatted reviews. The description of the accumulator should be, "The accumulator stores the formatted reviews seen so far." Now let's think about the for loop. What do we need to do for each review? We need to format it and then store it in the accumulator. Formatting the review sounds like its own task, and the call to reviews template function is already hinting that we need a helper function here. So I'm going to edit the call to the template function with a call to a function that I would like to use. It doesn't exist yet, but we will go and design it soon. Before we implement the helper function, I'll finish implementing this function body. I know I have the accumulator, which is storing the result so far, and I also have the result returned from format review. I need to concatenate or put these together. So I can write accumulator equals accumulator plus the return value from format review. That takes the current value of the accumulator and concatenates the current review to the end of it. Once we've gone through our loop, we need to return the value that's stored in the accumulator. If we rerun the test and scroll down, we can see that we have an error because the name format review is not defined. That serves as a reminder that we need to design that function. We've called a function that doesn't exist. I'll design this function now, and I'll work through it fairly quickly. Once it's time to write the examples for format review, I'll put them in the same testing block as the test for format reviews, and note that I'm putting them in the same order that the functions appear. That's not required, but it does make your program easier to read. I can look to my examples for format reviews to see what this helper function needs to return. For R1, we expect the string 1 star, this coffee shop was terrible. I want to ensure that I have more than one example, just to make sure that the function isn't always returning the same string. So let's do an example for R3 as well. In this case, it should return 3 stars, the food was only okay, and the service was slow. I've completed my examples for format review, so I'll run the code hoping that there's no syntax errors, but there is one. I can see that I used the wrong name in my function definition. I wanted it to be format review, not review format. I'll fix that and run again. And now we're happy because we have no syntax errors. I'll continue following the recipe and move on to the template step. I'll comment out the body of the stub, paste the body of the template, and write a note about where I copied the template from. And this reminds me that I forgot to do this in the previous design, so I'll add it now. Ideally, we want to make that comment as soon as we copy the template body, as it helps our readers figure out where the template body came from. Now I need to finish implementing this function body, and I can use the examples to guide me. I know that I need to return the rating, which is a number, but I know that I can use the built-in str or string function to convert that to a string. So it's the rating concatenated with a space, the word star, a dash, and then a space, and then the comment. Oops, just noticed I forgot to close that parenthesis. Let's rerun our tests and see if they pass. We can see that one of our tests failed. Let's try to figure out why. If I look at the result that we got, there's no space between the 1 star and the 3-star review. But in the result that we expect, there is a space between the 1 star and 3-star review. We need to think about where to fix this error. I think it's most appropriate to fix this in the format review function and add a space after the end of every review. Now we have to change the values that we expect for both of the format review examples, and we'll end up with an extra space at the end of this example. Okay, now I forgot to add a space here. Finally, all of our tests pass. In this screencast, we worked through an example in which we needed to design a helper function to perform a specific subtask, and our template helped us figure out that we needed a helper function because the call to reviews template function in list of reviews template served as a hint and a reminder that we may need to create a helper function there.